Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast, where we aim to inspire and motivate people to never give up on themselves or their dreams. We will chat with highly successful people from all walks of life and discuss what motivates and drives them to successfully attack life head on and never give up. Welcome to episode number 54 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is learning. Our quote today comes to us from Brian Herbert. The capacity to learn is a gift. The ability to learn is a skill. The willingness to learn is a choice. I'm excited to bring you today's episode. Our guest on today's podcast is all about giving and learning. When it comes to people that lead by example, she is clearly one of them. As a mom, entrepreneur, author, wife, speaker, and a leader in her community, the word excuse is not something that you'll find in her vocabulary. I'm honored to introduce Tisha Marie Pelletier. Tisha, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Thank you so much, Chris. Great to be here.
I appreciate the honor. Appreciate you being with us. So the first question we ask everybody is, are you ready to make it happen?
I am so ready to make this happen.
I knew you'd say that. So the number one objective is we always look to motivate and inspire our listeners. And I was curious if you have either a story about perseverance or perhaps a challenging time that tested you, but you kept on going and didn't quit.
I have plenty of stories about this very thing, but the one I want to share with listeners right now is back in December, I was going about my business. I had an event planning company, and I was actually scammed by someone who contacted me wanting my business services for event planning for an event that they were having coming up, and didn't even think about it, was like, okay, let's do this. We had about a month to plan, and long story short, it ended up being that it was a fraud. It was a fraudulent situation in which he was hiring my company to money launder. I know, shocking, crazy. You're just wondering, why would people even do such a thing? And it left me pretty ashamed. It left me embarrassed. I'm a leader here in the community, so I do a lot of facilitating, mentoring small businesses. And here was a time, Chris, where I felt like, wow, I don't even know if I can do this anymore. Like I was just had by this individual, and honestly fought very hard to get the money back, to work with the banks, to work with attorneys. I even had conversations with the Secret Service. Like, how many times do you think you're going to talk to the Secret Service? For me, I was like, never even a million years was thinking this. And it leaves you in this place. It leaves you in this place where you're questioning, am I cut out to be a business owner? Should I be going out and teaching other people how to be a business owner, when I was just embarrassed by a situation that just happened to me? And it wasn't until, Chris, I finally took ownership of what had happened and started being vulnerable with my tribe, with people in general, with just letting them know, if anything, I was going to teach them a lesson. I'm very big into going through these life experiences, whether good, whether bad, whatever it is, and learning from these, using these as teaching moments, and then going out and sharing my story, being very vulnerable. I wrote about this actually publicly on LinkedIn, and it was titled, if anyone wants to look at it, but it says, "A thief almost stole my business, but I didn't let him." And that definitely got some people's attention, to the point where people were coming back to me and saying, you know what, your story helped me out of a situation, or your story helped me feel less alone. Now, here's a kicker to this whole story. I was supposed to be planning this event in February 2018, so not that long ago. And right after this whole incident happened, I had been asked to speak at a conference called SOAR, which stood for Success Over All Resistance. Now, here's the kicker, Chris. You're going to laugh at this. March 18th was this conference that I was asked to speak at, and it happened to be at the exact same venue that I was planning this event for. So I was on the exact same stage 1 month later, now sharing my story of struggle and triumph and getting past it. When I told all of my gals in my Gals Inspiration Hub, I do a lot of facilitating and mentoring for startup businesses and small businesses and women in business, sharing them this very public, now vulnerable story of mine of how I was feeling. actually got them to tell me, you know what, Tisha, thank you so much for not taking the easy route. Thank you so much for not throwing in the towel, because life's hard. Business is hard. It's hard. It's hard to be an entrepreneur, especially, but you've got to have those people in your corner that are like, do not give up, do not quit, which is exactly what your podcast is titled, No Quit Living, right? So it was a great lesson. Hard lesson.
I was about to say it's a hard lesson, but I want to commend you for a couple things. First off, I appreciate you sharing that story with us. And one of the things we often talk about on our show is things can either make or break you. And obviously this wasn't a good experience, but at the end of the day, you had two choices. You could make it break you, or you could learn from it. And lo and behold, ironically, at the same venue, you went ahead and shared the story, and you said a word 3 times, I believe, is vulnerable. In life, yes. I think a lot of people are not willing to be vulnerable. It could be with a spouse, a friend, a coworker. And it doesn't mean just because you're vulnerable, it doesn't mean that you fail, and it doesn't mean that you are a failure. But the reality was you took this tough situation and you learned from it. And like you said, I think the best part about the story is you've had people that have contacted you that have learned from your story, and it helped them learn in different ways, whether it was business, starting a business, or continuing a business, but you didn't give up and you kept on going. So I appreciate you sharing that story with us.
Absolutely. And I think it allows people to also be vulnerable with me. A lot of those women, once I came off the stage, were coming up to me and saying, thank you so much. Like, I've been hiding this. I've been ashamed. I've been embarrassed. I had something very similar happen to me, and I've never spoken about it. And I'll be honest, like, I went to the banks, the police, everybody trying to remedy the situation. And at the end, they said, you did everything you possibly could. And if anything you can do for other people, it's to share it, to not feel victim to this, but to get out there and start talking about your experience. And that's exactly what I did. And it's brought me some comfort in knowing that I'm going out there and helping other people through it, whatever that may be, or helping them to avoid a situation like this. I mean, think about how many people are in online businesses and are going to go through this exact same thing because they didn't take those parameters. They didn't do the fact checking. They just took the money and then later on are realizing, oh no, I actually owe this money because it was a fraudulent charge. Like, it's a scary world, right? So good to be able to learn from that experience and caution yourself first of, is this a good thing? Is it too good to be true? Should I trust my intuition? And I say, yes, trust it. It is speaking volumes to you.
No, it's always easy to be a Monday morning quarterback and say what you could have, should have, would have done. But I appreciate you sharing that story with us. Before we went live, you were talking about some interesting things that you're doing with some grants in your community. I was wondering if you could briefly share a little bit about that with us.
Absolutely. So back in 2010, I was launching a business, and there's always 2 things that I think hold an entrepreneur back from moving forward and not quitting, right? It's resources and it's money. Like, how many of us say, I could have done this if I had more money, or if I had the support I needed, I would have done this. So back in 2010, when I won a grant, and it wasn't a ton of money, Chris, but it was enough to get me going, I decided I won this grant, and the only thing I can do now is pay it forward. So last year, I started giving a grant to women in business, specifically startups that were really needing those resources. And this year, I plan on doing it again. So I gift $500 in cash that I personally fund, as well as my business mentoring and marketing services. And then here's the beautiful part. I collaborate with so many other businesses that are helping those startups, whether it be attorneys, graphic designers, web designers, social media managers, whatever that may be, to really get that business and jumpstart it for them. So they're not stressing. They can focus on what they do best and have a safety net, if you will, of here's how we're going to move your business forward. I really wholeheartedly believe that startups, if given the chance and given some of those resources, are going to make it happen. They're going to make it happen. Right, Chris?
No doubt. I think that's so amazing that you do that. And you touched on something that's near and dear to us, is the whole concept of paying it forward. We've had quite a few guests that have shared different stories, and I think probably 4 or 5 times now that term has been repeated, which is pay it forward. And I think that's the best part I like about doing these podcasts is there's a story for everybody, whether it's male or female, young, old, business, non-business. There's always an opportunity to help somebody out. And I think what you're doing with startups is amazing because the reality is you were helped out by receiving a grant in 2010. And now, just a few years later, you are not only paying it forward, but you're not only talking about it, but you're putting your money where your mouth is. And I just can't wait to see over the next couple of years how many businesses you actually help not only get off the ground, but help get to a successful level.
You know, what's funny about that situation, well, not funny, but ironic, is when I announced this last year, I was putting it on different social media channels, and I had several people send me a message asking me why. Like, why would I give money to a startup? And it absolutely floored me. And it was one of those things like, here's why I do it, because I want to, because that's the simple truth. I want to give back. Like, how many coaches do we see that perhaps they're giving a service, but here it is, putting money where your mouth is and saying, you know what, I'm going to help you financially, but also with different resources too. So I don't think there needs to be an explanation. I think you just do it for the goodness of humankind. It's just to say, I want to do this because I know that this is going to help make a difference and impact others.
No, it definitely does. And I can tell you not only from the monetary perspective, which obviously you're doing, but also those other resources that you mentioned, because having the best funding behind you with no strategy or no resources on the other side obviously doesn't guarantee any success. So I think not only are you doing it financially, but as you mentioned, you're providing some of those resources, which I think are really cool as well.
Absolutely.
One of the things we utilize every day in our show is a daily quote. I was curious if you have a favorite quote.
I absolutely do. It's actually on my website. I am one of those people that doesn't believe in following the crowd. I've never been that person. I've always stuck to my guns and said, if I want to do it this way, I'm going to do it this way. So this comes from Ralph Waldo Emerson, and it says, do not go where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. All-time favorite quote. I think it speaks volumes to me in that, you know what, I don't want to do things the conventional way that everybody is doing and everybody, is working their business this way. Like, I want to run my business in an authentic way. And if that means steering off the path and doing it my own way and being a leader to those other people, then that's what I want to do.
No, that's awesome, and I think that is a great quote. And one of the things I will just touch on real quickly is I think there's a difference of leading your own path versus, you want to learn from the people ahead of you, from not only what they've been successful with, but also avoid some of the mishaps. But you want to go your own route. You want to create your own path, and you want to have your own success and your own spin to things. So I think that's a great quote, and we'll put that in the show notes as well.
Perfect. That sounds good.
Tisha, if you could go back and to give the 20-year-old version of yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
You know what's funny, Chris, is I'm talking to some high school students and college students. I do that quite a bit. And there's a really great quote that actually Gary Vee had just put up on LinkedIn. And I loved this because it's exactly what I would say. It's remember who you are. Like, really hold true to that. Don't ever apologize for who you are. Like, you're an individual. You're a unique individual. You have your own strengths. Never forget who you are. Because so many of us, I find that we find ourselves in this like identity crisis, and we're trying to compare ourselves to other people too. And that's just that you're just in for a rude awakening, So be true to who you are. Don't apologize for who you are. Live the life that you're meant to live.
That's a great quote. And I think a lot of people try to follow someone and do everything that they do. And I think that's where, as you mentioned, the identity piece comes in, because you do want to follow people as far as if you're following a specific business or a path or a venture, but you still want to hold true to who you are. So I'm glad you shared that with us.
Yes.
One of the areas we often discuss is getting out of our comfort zone. I was curious if you can attribute any of your success to something specific that you really did getting out of your comfort zone.
So I do a lot of Facebook Live videos, and I find that people, they're just afraid of jumping out there. We talked about this earlier in the show of being vulnerable. And for me, being a leader and running different groups from 2010 all the way up to now, I find that I'm always put on this pedestal. I'm sure you've kind of heard this too, where people put you up there. And I remember someone telling me that, I was a little afraid that everybody was trying to make me their role model. It was a little scary, to be seen as this role model when I'm like, I don't even know if I have my own life together. So maybe you shouldn't look at me as your role model. But I started to own that more because someone had said to me before that you don't get to choose who makes you their role model. You just live that. You live that for them. If they view you as the role model, then that's who you are to them. And it took me a long time to just own that. And to a point where now, like I get on Facebook Lives all the time, every week, in fact, and I do share my vulnerability. I share a lot of that. And to me, that is getting out of a comfort zone of having to be this person to other people and having this facade and pretending that everything is so perfect in my world. It's not. I don't know whose life is super perfect, but to me, that is a get out of your comfort zone and just be you, and do some of those actions that in turn impact other people's lives. I do a fair amount of speaking as well. And that's something that I've had to learn too, to get out of that comfort zone and just do it because you're making a greater impact when you do.
No question about that. And John Lee Dumas, who has a very successful podcast, Entrepreneur on Fire, I've been very fortunate to become friends with him. He's been on my show and I've been on his show. But one of the things he talks about quite often is all the magic happens out of your comfort zone. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of us stay within our comfort zone, whether that's ease of money or job or career or relationship. But a lot of times it's where all the greatness happens is by just getting out of your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a situation back years ago when I had this event, and I'm writing about it in my next book, but everything was against me. All the odds are against me. And you have to believe in it so much. If you have an idea, if you're passionate about something, you've got to let that carry you through and you will make it happen. Like I was so out of my comfort zone here. Money was against me. I remember my dad telling me, quit while you're ahead, waive all your deposits, take your money and go. Like, don't go through with this. And I did go through with it. And it was super successful for the next 6 years. So you have to put your mind to it. You've got to have the right mindset and you've just got to work your tail off to make that happen. And you'll find that things will start to fall into place just as it should.
I like that you said that, work your tail off. That's one of the things we talk about on our show is taking action. So as we know, life is incredibly challenging. I wanted to ask you, what motivates and drives you to keep going every single day?
For me, I know it's my family. You have to know your why, of course. I love reading all of Simon Sinek's posts. I feel like he and I are one and the same. I love being that leader, but also learning from the people I lead. He says that all the time, and it so resonates with me that being a leader, but then also learning from everybody that I'm around all the time, it's a continuous educational experience. It helps me grow as well. So for me, that's something that I enjoy doing. It is my why. I love the impact. Like it's an adrenaline rush. It's a high when I can be around people that are like-minded and know that I'm helping them, but they're also helping me get through this business and this life. And then of course, just having my family, having their support is definitely that part of that why. It's why I do this. It's why, I'm writing a book right now. Like I want to be able to share that story with my kiddos of all of the triumphs and struggles that I've even had.
No, I love that. We always talk about ABL, always be learning.
Yes, always be learning.
If you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
I would say, I always say this, somebody asked me the same question and I said, Ellen DeGeneres, just because I love her spirit. I love that she's all about paying it forward. Do you ever watch the show?
I will tell you, and maybe I shouldn't admit this on the show, but I was just talking to our digital media company that we work with that does an unbelievable job with all the No Quit Living stuff. And one of the things we were talking about is we want to get onto the Ellen show because of not only who she is, but her audience and people that follow her. And you said something about 3 minutes ago is like-minded individuals. And I think she's an incredibly talented person, but when I say like-minded is she talks about paying it forward, but then she also does pay it forward. And I can't tell you that I've watched her show in God knows how long, but I will tell you that I do see clips and videos and things all the time on YouTube and Facebook and things about not only does she talk about doing different things, but she brings guests on, she gifts certain things. So yeah, no, I'm a big fan of hers as far as the type of person she is, but more importantly, as I said, the concept of paying it forward.
She just seems so genuine, and that's who I need in my life right now. I'm not about fake. So not about fake, but I really love her energy. I find that if I were sitting across from her having dinner, that I would just be rolling on the floor laughing. Like I just feel like she bring that kind of energy, that positive, that humor, that laughter that I think we all need in our life. Like life's too serious sometimes, and she kind of breaks that up a bit. But yeah, exactly what you said. I love that mentality of helping other people, paying it forward, having them on the show. Every time, it's funny because I have a 5-year-old daughter, Ellie, and we'll be watching the show and she's like, "Are you crying again?" I'm like, "I know." I'm such a sap at this, but I cry all the time. And her show is no exception. Like, because there's so much emotion in it and how she's helping these people. I've actually applied, Chris, to be on her show. Like there's a form on her website, so you can try to get on the show, but that's definitely a bucket list item, is just to get to the show, like to be in the audience and witness it, witness it firsthand.
We will get on the show together some way, yes. Shape or form.
Of course.
So I wanted to ask you quickly if you could share if there's anything exciting that you're working on that you'd like to tell our listeners about.
Yes. So I wrote my first book back in 2010. The event that I was sharing with you is my Mom Entrepreneur Celebration, and I debuted my first book. And that book was called When the Universe Throws a Curveball. And what's funny is now recently I've had several women come to me and say they broke out my book again. And I'm like, that book, it's so old, because it's my story. It's a lot of storytelling coupled with life lessons. And it really has lit a fire under me to write this last book called What Are the Odds? And they're really short stories, again, coupled with life lessons of personal and professional experiences that I've gone through. So I am knee deep into writing that. I have, in fact, on my board right now, to have it done, my part of writing it by December 1st. And I'm very, very, very close to doing that, to debut it back in 2018. And it's not really, to me, Chris, it's not really for the masses. I'd love for people to read it. It's really just me getting my story out and having that legacy for my children. I think too, my son being dedicated with the first book. Now my daughter's like, I want a book. I would love a book. So it's kind of that thing too of, I knew there was going to be 2 books. Definitely 2 books.
All right,
so that project I'm working on.
No, that sounds really exciting. If you write a third, I'd like to be dedicated to the third one, if that's okay.
I did write an inspirational quotes book kind of in between that was really some closing thoughts that I share in my meetings, and even have some of my members' quotes in there because they're just hilarious. But I do have. So this is kind of my third book, I guess 2.5 books, if you want to call it that.
Well, 2.5 is pretty good because most people don't write a single one, so you're 2.5 ahead of them.
It's a challenge. Let me tell you, if I could go back, I'd say write it every single day, write something about that day, like journal it, and then you'll have your book. Because going back and reliving things is, you have to remember. And I don't know if I have a great memory anymore, but yeah. That would be my life lesson to someone who's writing a book.
That is a good recommendation, is write it down, because people do forget things. So before we let you go, I wanted to ask if you have any parting words for our listeners.
Yes, I definitely say for startups, just start. A lot of business owners, they're going to question, they're going to let doubt, they're going to let fear enter their mind, and just start. And then another thing would be to find your tribe. Like, I could not do this business if I didn't have a tribe, because being a business owner, very, very isolating experience. The journey is very isolating. You'll question yourself, you'll talk to yourself, but you need people in your corner. Like I shared earlier, you need those people who are going to support you no matter what, no judgment. They know it's hard. They're there to help you, and they're there to help you move forward with your business. And that's exactly what I love to do too in business mentoring and helping those startups.
No, I can definitely tell that, and you speak about passion, about paying it forward, and obviously the work you're doing with the grants is pretty remarkable. So last question, I promise it's the easiest one. What's the best way for our listeners to either follow you or connect with you?
Sure. Well, I love LinkedIn. I'm more of a LinkedIn person. So people can find me at linkedin.com/in, of course, /Tisha Marie Pelletier. So just my full name. And then one other thing too, Chris. So for businesses that are starting up, I do offer a complimentary business strategy session. And that's just for the two of us to get to know each other. Let me learn about, where you're struggling in business or maybe an idea that you're having and you just need a little bit of fresh perspective. So people can find me and book that with me as well at bit.ly/30biz, B-I-Z strategy.
We will put all those links in the show notes as well. So Tisha, listen, I can't thank you enough for not only being a guest on our show, but also for the great stuff you shared with us today, especially the whole concept of paying it forward. So I look forward to hopefully speaking with you soon.
Thank you so much, Chris. It was a pleasure.
To sum up today's episode and our theme of the day, learning, Tisha delivers some great stuff. She has taken many different experiences, both good and bad, and learned from them all. As a leader in her community, an area where Tisha is clearly passionate about is entrepreneurship and helping others succeed. After receiving her own grant back in 2010, today, Tisha pays it forward by giving her own grants to startup businesses. She was clear that she feels it is important to learn from others and to find your own tribe that will help spread your message. So the question for you is very simple. Who is in your tribe? Who do you count on and who can count on you? Our call to action is this. Identify the key people in your tribe and thank them. In return, find your own way to give back to others. Put your money where your mouth is and help someone else find their greatness. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.